How would you respond to a parent's worst fear? A childhood cancer diagnosis. Today's guest, Bekah, knows that journey deeply. With faith, Christ, and family at the heart of her strength, Bekah and her family turned their pain into purpose, uplifting other families facing childhood cancer along the way. Through advocacy work with Voices Against Cancer, St. Baldrick's, and her own Caring Voices initiative, Bekah has become a beacon of hope and support to those on similar paths. She's a devoted wife to her high school sweetheart, mother to 4, including 17-year-old Addison, a cancer survivor, and 3 boys who love everything sports, and a compassionate entrepreneur as a cosmetologist and salon owner for almost 20 years. I'm thrilled to have her on Act to Impact to share her story, her mission, and her incredible impact. You're listening to Act to Impact with Brandy DeVries. Through heartfelt stories of resilience, hope, and community, I share my personal experience as a longtime advocate and fundraiser for the national nonprofit Children's Cancer Research Fund. Invite pediatric cancer families to tell their stories and highlight individuals who use their unique gifts to create a positive impact. It's time to ignite action. Welcome to Act to Impact. I'm Brandy DeVries, and today I'm chatting with our special guest, Bekah. But first, if you are new to the show, and you probably are because this is a new show still, thanks for being here. And you may have heard that in this show, we take action. And my guess is that you're probably here because you're an action taker as well. So before we dive into this episode, let's pause. Please show me how you take action. Click the follow button, like this episode, or leave a comment. That is going to help us reach more action takers like yourself. So let's dive into this episode. Let's take action. I'm here with Bekah. So welcome to Act to Impact.
Hello there. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I just want to talk a little bit first too about how we were connected initially and why you are on Act to Impact today. So we were first connected through Instagram. I love like the power of social media, right?
Right.
It really, it's a blessing and it's a curse, but in this case, it was definitely a blessing. So
Yes.
I had saw that you were announced as Mrs. South Dakota International 2024 and got to see you compete at Mrs. International in July as well. But on Instagram, I initially saw that your platform, Caring Voices, had the connection to childhood cancer. So I reached out to you because that's typically what I do. I just reach out, I say hi. I like to encourage and support people, especially when it comes to people who are also advocating for childhood cancer. So I used my people skills to reach out. And at that time, I had asked you what your connection was and asked about your daughter. And you had said that she had been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma in, I believe it was 2012. But now she is 17 years old and a survivor.
She is. Yes, it is amazing. Yes. It's been a crazy journey. I mean, I think any parent can say that, but having that diagnosis at the beginning of such a young life is definitely not something any parent anticipates or thinks will ever be part of their story. But it definitely was a large part of ours and continues to be. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's exactly where we need to start talking today is let's talk about your daughter. Let's start with her. Take us to that moment when you noticed that something just wasn't right or normal with Addison as a 4-year-old, right? 4 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. She really, her story is a little bit different. It's not, the one where they just had bruises and things like that, which is a lot of times a typical diagnosis of a childhood cancer diagnosis. They're maybe tired, fatigued, bruising a lot, things like that, sick. Addie's was really just kind of a hit and miss type thing, if you want to even call it that. It was literally her 4th birthday. On her 4th birthday, we decided to take a family trip to Kansas City, which is like a 5-6 hour drive for us. So it was a little drive. When we got there to the hotel we were going to be staying at, she complained that her hip was hurting her and she was uncomfortable. And I, you don't think of anything terrible, obviously, been sitting in the car. So I'm like thinking, okay, her sore. She's been sitting in a car, who knows, And so that weekend went on. She seemed a little off all weekend, just like maybe she wasn't feeling great, but still continued to party and go swimming and do the things that we were there to do as a family. And I would say went home, kind of carried on as normal, nothing major for a little while there. Her birthday is the end of February. And so from February to really like the middle of May, her actual diagnosis was May 18th. We were very blindsided even at that time that it was cancer. We went down the path of, it started with me taking her to acute care because these weird spells kept showing up on weekends, of course. As every parent knows, that's when your kid gets sick, is in the night or on the weekends when the doctors aren't easily available, right? But hers would come and go. And it was really just the hip pain. And it wasn't anything else that was presenting to show anything weird or anything off, anything alarming that you would think to get them checked. So as this kind of progressed every few weekends, which was still like, they're like, why would it go away like that? Why would it come back? Mm-hmm. There is no reason. They don't know. That's part of our story, and that's part of Addie. But yeah, so I took her in finally one weekend, and they did just basic stuff. Took an X-ray, obviously, of that area to make sure there wasn't, a break or something weird that we've missed somehow. Did labs, everything came back normal. They said there is a condition that basically kids can get. She had ear infections off and on, and they said basically it's almost like that infection can settle in the joints within someone's body. And so that had only been a few weeks prior to this all starting. And so that was kind of just like their thought, is that it was some sort of like an infection, which just like causes inflammation in joint spaces, and it will kind of go away over time, like a cold. And so they said, that was their thought, just as an acute care doctor, and just what was being presented, that if it continued, then we could go see an orthopedic doctor to see kind of what their thoughts were.
So like cancer wasn't even on their radar.
No,
is what
not at all. Okay. Not at all. No, I don't think anybody even entertained that idea at this point, So that was probably like a Saturday. Monday comes around. I was like, kind of just waiting to see what happened. She seemed to be fine. I believe it was then. Kind of go through the week. And as the week goes on, I remember she had a little friend over, and she just sat on the couch and watched her friend play. She said her hip was hurting her again. And then it got to the point where she wouldn't even get up to go to the bathroom, and it was needing us to carry her. And I'm like, okay, something more is going on. This can't be just this. And it's getting worse now. And what, if she was like a 16-year-old girl, I'd be thinking, yeah, she's just trying to be lazy, doesn't want to do something, right? But a 4-year-old their mind doesn't go there. And so I'm like, this is not normal. So I did call the peds orthopedic doctor, kind of asked him. Of course, we take her in. She's running around the waiting room, like everything's fine. And I'm like, girl, 5 minutes ago, you were like at home crying, her hip hurt, come walk to the bathroom. But again, as they knows, they seem to like perk up or whatever when you get to the doctor with them finally. But we go in. Again, they do another set of x-rays. He kind of did, an exam, moved her leg around different ways, did lab work, everything again seemed very normal. Only thing that he thought was like a little bit off was when she tried to like sit down. She kind of just like, she got to almost like a sitting spot and then just kind of almost like collapsed herself down. And he's like, they don't like to do scans, like a CAT scan, MRI, like that kind of stuff on younger kids because they have to sedate them and all those things. And at this point, I'm like, can we just please just do something? Mm-hmm. So he said, he sent us home again and said, if this progresses, let's do a scan. So I go home and I'm like, I'm not okay with this, watching this. So I called and I said, I want to do the scan. Mm-hmm. Well, reverse about a month before that, we had just found out we were pregnant with kiddo number 3. So of course I could not be around radiation. I couldn't be anywhere in the room for that kind of thing. So her dad, my husband, is just our rock star in our family. He is our go-to. He holds it together and makes things happen. So he sat in there and they did it without any sedation. She laid there like a champ at 4 years old. He read her books. I'm almost positive he still remembers the book. We were just talking about this not too long ago. Sure. Yep. He sat there and read it to her, and she just laid on that bed like a champ as this loud machine is scanning her body to see what's going on. So we find out then at that point she has a bone infection in her hip because there was definitely something that showed up on the scan. Again, Cancer was never brought up, nothing like that. So we get admitted to the hospital for a week. They put a PICC line in her arm, which is, for those that are not familiar with this kind of a world, it's almost like a little bit more of a permanent IV. So it kind of runs under the skin, and it's like a bigger tube, and then it runs in, and it's just removed by pulling it out. Whether like an IV is like, that needle, it's just uncomfortable. You have that all the time. But these ports, or these PICC lines, are meant to be a little bit something that can, they can have for a while. They can go home with them, that kind of thing. So we were in the hospital for about a week on really high dose antibiotics, steroids, all that kind of stuff to just kind of slow down the infection and kind of get that under control. Again, she seemed to be improving like she had in the past, where it'd go away. So at about a week, they let us go home. We were put on a protocol for at home, where she had IV antibiotics that we administered through that PICC line. Then it was supposed to be 4 to 6 weeks. So we did that. Like I said, she seemed to be doing better, nothing showing up. And then I think it was about 3 weeks into that, pain started again. So I called her infectious disease doctor and I said, should this be flaring up? And she's like, no, it shouldn't be at all. Why don't you come in? Let's do another scan and see if, this is progressing, if maybe we just don't have her on the right strain of antibiotics, something like that. We go in. Now, this is where, to me, it gets a little bit like, I wish I would have almost documented things more, because it does get to be a little bit of a blur. I don't ever recall them saying anything about cancer, about doing any kind of a biopsy. I'm assuming they did, and I probably signed off on it because they probably could have done a biopsy if I wouldn't have. But when they did this step is when they did do a biopsy. Now, again, I don't know if that was for them to test to see if it was the right antibiotic and there was something else going, that way, or if they were assuming that there was maybe something else possibly at this time. I'm not sure. They did do another scan though, and there was some other areas within her hip around there that they thought was going on. So they said to us that they thought it was fluid buildup in that area. So they went in, they did a biopsy on that area of her hip, and they put a drain in her hip to drain that fluid. So during that time, then we were just in the hospital. I think it was just like overnight, honestly. This was leading up into that area of May, right before diagnosis. And we went about 24 hours, and there was not like a drop of fluid out of that at all, like nothing. I'm like, well, that's weird, So they're like, well, we're not getting anything out of that, so we're going to pull it. We'll go from there. So send us home again. I want to say it was maybe a day, 2 days later. I was at work, actually just getting ready to start a client for the day. And my mother-in-law every Wednesday would come up and watch our kids. She'd drive an hour and a half, did that all throughout my kiddos, baby up to when they went to school. And so she was at home with our kids. We had Addie at the time, who was 4, and then Asher, our oldest boy, I guess. So our second, he was 2 at the time. She was at home with them. And I get a phone call from the doctor, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I, quickly answer it. And it's infectious disease. That's who we had been dealing with this whole time. And I'll never forget her words when she said to me, she goes, Bekah, we got the results back from that biopsy that we took the other day. And she goes, I really don't like to do this over the phone. And I said, okay. And she just kind of kept pausing. And it was just like, I'm sure I can't imagine being in that position either as a physician and having to talk to parents like this. But she said, if I tell you to come in right now, you're going to know something's wrong. She goes, so I'm going to tell you. She's like, Addie's biopsy came back and it's cancer. And I'm like, what? And like literally to me, which seems so crazy because I feel like as parents, our minds go crazy and wander everywhere anyways. But it had not dawned on me, thought to me that was like even a thing for her. I knew of another little girl who had cancer. So it's like, I knew it was there, I just, again, you never think it's going to be your child. And I wasn't, we weren't until that moment, and that's for me, part of where this advocacy comes in, is that every person out there is not a cancer parent until they are, right? And so that's to me where your world changes. My world changed in that moment. We were dealing with a health scare of our child, but not to the extent of something that I ever felt like her life was literally in jeopardy and that we were now going to have to fight for her. There's so much medications out there. There's so many things. And to think of, we went from something that an antibiotic can treat and it was not fun, but now I'm fighting for my little 4-year-old's life. I have a 2-year-old whose world is also going to be flipped upside down. And I have a baby in my stomach right now that I am trying to do the best I can to nurture and to take care of, because that's what you do. Right. And so I'm like, there are so many things just racing through my head. And I remember sitting right outside of my salon door on these old marble stairs that we had there. And I can still recall all of the things. I am not one to remember things. Well, ask my husband, he can remember what we were wearing at our first date. Like, when was our first date? Where? And I can remember that moment I got that phone call. My business partner and I were the only ones there that day. She was actually just getting done with a client when I got that phone call, and I'm not a crier at all. I didn't even cry in that moment, but she knew that something wasn't okay. Like, she just stopped and she's like, what's going on? And we've known each other for years. And it was just that just raw, like, I didn't even know what to say. Like, how do you even tell anybody that? Right. And so we both kind of stood there. She's a baller. She's a crier. We talk about that all the time. She cries for both of us. No matter what the situation, she's like bawling, her client's bawling. And I'm standing there like in shock and like, didn't know what to do, know how to respond to it. I remember picking up the phone, saying the same thing to my husband. I just got this phone call. And now you have to tell these people that love her just as much as you do. Here we go. And tell them over the phone also. But people need to know, and action has to happen. And they wanted her at the hospital as soon as we could get her there. I mean, that's the difference between pediatric cancer and adults. You hear people getting diagnosed with cancer as adults, and they're like, yeah, I got my follow-up in 3 weeks, and then we're going to make a game plan, and then we're going to do some scans. No, I mean, that doctor that morning, like, she told me that, and she goes, I need you to get her here, and we need to get things going. I'm like, okay. Yeah. So I called Nick. I called my mom. She was out driving around, and I was like, you need to pull over. Addie's the first grandkid on both sides of our family. She was the first girl grandchild on my side of the family, still is the only out of 7 grandkiddos. So just has that special extra little spot in the grandparents' hearts. And so I called my mom. I'm like, you have to pull over. She couldn't even talk. I mean, she was so hysterical. I can still remember that and recall that. Those things are so ingrained in you. And then I remember calling my mother-in-law, and I'm like, what are you guys doing? And to me, this is just still like the weirdest part. She's like, we're at the park. What's up? And I'm like, well,
yeah,
Addie's got cancer. It's like, what? Like, what? And to me, that's like the craziest part. Like, she was at the park playing, right? And we met them at home. We all met at my house. My business partner, Jana, drove me home, and we all stood there and were like, here we go. That's really when the battle began, broke down. We had our moment. We yelled out to God, the whys, and now let's. And we loaded her up. We got her to the children's hospital here in town. And we're so blessed to have the children's hospital that we do. It's state of the art. It's got some of the best things. It's called the Castle. It literally looks like a castle. At that time, we had 1 peds oncologist, at least 4 of them now, which tells you something of the rate of these kiddos being diagnosed. It's terrible, but we do have that here. So yeah, we got her there that day. They did scans that day, where they went to see, they inject like a dye into an IV, and they scan them, and it just lights up wherever there is active cancer cells. And she lit up all over. She had tumors, from her spine all the way down her spine. Obviously the main area was in her right hip. She had them in her abdomen in a couple different areas, but they had not adhered to any like organs, major organs, anything like that, which that's where we found the blessing in it, because since they hadn't adhered to anything like that, we had better treatment option.
Mm-hmm.
And so they initially diagnosed her with leukemia because the way that biopsy came back. How I understand it in my medical terms, and maybe there will be hopefully someone listening to this that knows better, but from what I understand is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is what she was originally or actually diagnosed with. Once they got full diagnosis back, that took a couple more days. They had to send it to Mayo to get it broken down more. And so how I understand, again, mom's medical terms is that non-Hodgkin's kind of is the same type of cancer cell, but it presents itself in a different way. So a lot of kiddos you'll hear have leukemia, ALL, AML, and that's a blood cancer that's in their blood cells, and that's why it shows in work. Hers presented itself in tumor form, and therefore when they would do labs, everything would be normal because it wasn't affecting her bloodstream or her system that way. And so that's when they then, how do we treat this? Or what's our plan of attack? And so literally the next day they put her port in, which is the permanent thing under their chest so that they can access that for an IV line. And it does less damage just because a lot of adults, even as far as chemo patients, have these, and that's how they can get that chemo into them without, like their veins can't handle it otherwise because it's so strong. Mm-hmm. So they got that the next day and started chemo that very next day. So it was a crazy journey, to say the least, from the very beginning. But again, we were very blessed. She went through 2 years of very intense chemo. It's the other thing with childhood cancer is that there is less than 4% of the national budget is directed towards childhood cancer research. So a lot of these treatments kids are enduring and having to go through for whatever cancer is out there for them that they get thrown with is actually an adult treatment because they don't have options for these kids. So basically it's, okay, this is what we would do for an adult that's this size. We're going to give it to a kid that's this size. So let's just drag it out for a different span. Like there just is not as many treatment options for kids. And so with hers, thankfully, she responded very quickly. At her 3-month scans, her tumors were shrinking. We were seeing really great improvement on that. And so we just kept with the protocol that we were hoping for, and were able to complete her treatment within 2 years, which is pretty normal for a childhood cancer diagnosis, depending on obviously what kind of cancer they're diagnosed with. We did not have to do radiation, which was a blessing because that obviously comes with a whole another level of risks and long-term side effects, aside different from even the chemo itself, which is scary. But we did not have to go down the radiation path, which is a huge, huge blessing. So
that's good. Yeah, thankful for those little victories. Probably when you're in the thick of that, you're like, okay, there's a lot of other things happening, but if we don't have to go through this one thing, like that's going to help her. And I'm sure you guys did consider that as a huge win during that time. So,
you find those small victories in each moment. You have to, or you go crazy.
Yep, absolutely. And also I'm very curious too, like, how do you tell a 4-year-old you have cancer and explain to them what they're going to be going through for the next 2 years for sure. And then to that point where they can say, or you can say that you're a survivor. And also like when was she be able to say, when did you guys say like, yes, she's in survivorship now?
Yeah.
How long did that take?
Yeah. Well, the first part of your question, I would say, as far as kids go and explaining to them, in the simplest of forms, but trying to be honest with them and upfront with them. You need them to know and understand that what's going on because their world is obviously going to change. For her, I remember talking about that there's germs or bugs that can make us sick, and she got some really yucky ones, and so we need to give them medicine that will make them go away so that they don't make her more sick. So explaining it, in terms like that. Of course, being a hairstylist, I remember trying to figure out how in the heck we were going to tell a 4-year-old that she was going to lose her hair. That was a huge part for me, for us, because especially girls, little girls, they want that long, beautiful hair. I have little girls that come in the salon all the time and they don't want a haircut because they want their hair to be really long, you know, and it's like, we're going to trim it. And it's like to tell a little girl, your hair's all going to fall out. That was a really hard time for me because I felt like I know how much identity women find in their hair because they deal with that every day. That was hard because I knew that that was something that she was going to be able to, that physical, like being able to see that is what in any situation, even when I have adult people come in who are going through cancer treatment, it's when that hair starts falling out, they look sick. They see that they are unhealthy. That's where you get that just like physical, like, holy cow, something is going on, and people start commenting. So that was really hard for me. I remember showing her a lot of pictures, trying to find pictures of kids, trying to find pictures of their ports to just show her, like, this is what it is. I gave her the option, like, before her hair fell out, like, do you want to have a cute little short haircut? Do you want this? Do you want that? Like, this is what this is where you're going to be. And showed her like a little kiddo, you know, that was already bald. Do you want to have like a fun little haircut in between? Do you want to do something fun for your color? I remember my sweet sister-in-law, she cut her hair short the same moment that my daughter did, just to have somebody else have the same hairstyle as her and think she was cool. So yeah, we ended up giving her a little kind of like pixie cut, super cute. We just tried to make it like everybody was doing cool hair things at that moment. I shaved her little brother's, buzzed his head and made a heart I remember I still have a picture of it, a little heart on the top. Yeah. And shaved her name in the middle of it. Just anything like so that she could see like others were going to have cool hair too, you know, for that time. And kids like surprise you. It is so crazy. I remember we had a group of our friends, they came over kind of when she started losing her hair, and they had this huge tote of wigs in like dress up princess outfits. And she was like, why would I want that? Why do I like, okay. You know,
right.
they wanted to make sure she had all the wigs to go with the outfits. So she would feel like she had something. Who cares? You know, like, but she was like, why would I want that?
Yeah.
That, you know, and I'm like, okay, whatever. And even like when her hair started falling out, I'll still never forget it. Like I would lay her in the bathtub and I would just scrub her head because I did know that through being in the hair industry, when their hair starts falling out, everything's being attacked essentially in their body, good and bad. And so I even had a client who was a male, and he said he remembers when he was chemo, he would ride a motorcycle and his arm hair blowing in the wind would hurt because it was like getting ready to fall out. And he's like, everything hurt. And so I remember her just like when I would just like rub her head, like in the bathtub, like washing it, she would just like geek out. Like she would just lay there, like almost falling asleep. And that wasn't normally her. And then like when it did start falling out, there would be so many little fine hairs in the bathtub, and my heart's like breaking and I'm trying to hold it together for her. And all she says is, Mom, she's like, there's like little wormies in the bathtub. And I'm like, yeah, you know, like trying to like
okay, I'm
positive
gonna go
like
with
she is. I'm like, oh my gosh, my 4-year-old's over here like totally cool with wormies in the bathtub. And I'm like, not that her hair is falling out. She's hair, you know? So yeah, they definitely surprise you. The other super cool thing is I know a lot of hospitals have it. Our castle has it. It's called the Child Life Specialists, and they are just literally a team that all they do is go around and try to make the child's life easier while they're in the clinic, while they're in the hospital. It's not just for cancer kids, but, you know, chronically ill kids. And they go around and they try to explain anything they can in a child's term. I remember they had a teddy bear who had a port. And so the kids could pretend to clean their port, access the teddy bear's port, things like that, so that they could see and be able to do this on something just like they were going to get done. They had pictures of the operating room of what that looked like so they could see it beforehand before they went back there. So all of those things were easier for them, and a great way to understand for both kids and siblings too. And as parents, it was very comforting also to see that peace in your child's eyes before they had to go off to surgery, that they actually were okay with it.
Yeah.
So that was great. And then, I'm sorry, what was the other part of that question?
When did you guys enter survivorship with Addie?
Oh, yes, that's right. So basically, you know, they say that you're in remission. They said she was in remission when we were done with treatment at 2 years. Obviously, you do, the scans and the things to make sure that you're progressing in the right stages. And then it's technically 5 years out from your end of treatment is when they are like, okay, you're in remission. You're like good to go. I think actually, I'm sorry, they say you're in remission at that 5-year point when they say like you were cancer, like your chances of that reoccurring are pretty slim to none. Now, from 5 to 10 years, you have to watch secondary cancer. That's another thing that many kids end up dealing with because of the cancer or the treatments that they had to endure for their first cancer. People don't understand that. They see even, a year into her treatment, she started getting some of her hair back because we switched chemos to a different kind for a time period, and then she lost her hair again. But they start seeing that hair come back and that life is somewhat normal, and everyone's kind of like, oh, she's fine, she's healthy. And it's like, no. Like, she's got IV access to her hair, gets 6 chemo pills every night while she's sleeping. In the middle of the night, we have to wake her up to give them to her. You know what I mean? Like, they don't see all the things, and so that does get hard too. I feel like as a parent, or being like something that's surrounding children, is to like, you get that blast at the beginning of like everybody's like coming around you, and then that newness wears off and you kind of feel like you're on your own. And so that's a different area and a different journey to be on also. You have your family and friends that love you and support you, but you really feel alone, almost more so in that middle. And then, you get to that 5-year mark, and everything should be normal. And I think everyone just has that mindset and everything's gone, but you still have obviously that like agony of in the back of your head, what if this comes back? And then you get to that 5-year mark and you're like, okay, now we have potential of a secondary cancer because I had to save her life with this. And I know a handful of kids who have died from their secondary cancer. They beat the first one. They did amazing. They got through all the things, and then they get a secondary cancer, and their body can't handle that chemo time and time and time again. Their heart, their organs give out because it cannot handle that. And so that was also a very scary part for us. And they watch all that stuff with these kiddos. I mean, they do heart screening before they even start their first chemo to make sure that they can handle it, or if they have issues that arise, what is their base point, So that is a very real thing, and it was very scary. And then they hit that 10-year mark. And thank God we are at that. That's a huge celebration point for us also, is you hit that 10-year mark, and your chance of a relapse of original cancer and secondary cancers drop off to your chance of getting cancer is just like anybody else walking down the street. So that 10-year mark is where I would say is like the real victory point, because you really feel like your chances of things have really like dropped down of any sort of relapse. So that in our clinic here at Sanford, they now started a survivorship program for those kids, because they're getting more kids that are getting to that point, which is amazing. They didn't have that before. But it's a real thing that kind of, as you get out from that, and there's still a lot of unhealthy things happening in their bodies because of what they've been through, that you have to endure, and lots of follow-ups and checkups and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that story. And then also a lot of like the knowledge and some of that background info.
Well, yeah. And that's the stuff people don't understand, and don't know. If you haven't been there, you don't know. So
exactly. Yeah. Well, let's shift gears a little bit more into, like you kind of alluded to it a little bit, like you kind of hit that middle ground sometimes where you're not in it anymore, but clearly you still need some type of a community. So was there a time or something specific that somebody had did for you guys and your family that led you to want to do more for the childhood cancer community, like start those comfort care sacks?
Yeah. Yeah. For us, there was a bag that we got, and it was a little backpack, just had a couple little tiny things when we first were diagnosed. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, that is so cool. There's like people have already been there, and they're like coming alongside of others. So to us, I remember thinking that was really cool. When I talked to somebody else in the cancer community, they got a different type of bag, but that was the thing that stuck out to them originally too, because I was trying to figure out what can we do to come alongside of these people. And I knew that's what stuck out to our family. But when I was starting to hear that general consensus of this bag And it was, like I said, there was nothing amazing, but it was just something I still remember. Like I said, my memory's not good. That darn little backpack that had like crayons and a coloring book in it was like stuck out to me. Yeah. So I remember that. And again, then I remember feeling that such aloneness, I guess, is just a really way to put it. And I thought to myself, and I remember I got involved with, not to the extent I do of things now, but when she was going through treatment, I'm like, okay, who can I come alongside of to feel like I have that support also? And that's when you get really involved in those families that you basically live at the hospital with, and you get to know a lot of them. Some of those stories end up really heartbreaking and hurt really bad. But also those are the people that are your community, and they're the people who are going through the trenches at the same time with you. And so having them alongside of you, I was like, you have to have that, right? And you're there to support each other. You're there to review labs together, to celebrate the victories, to celebrate the scans, and then to also be there in the hardest moments when you're burying your child. I still remember going to, some of those funerals of those kids and just being like, you want to help so much and take that hurt away from those families and those siblings that are just literally laying in a ball on the ground, blood curdling, crying because they are burying their sibling from cancer. And there's nothing you can do, but yet your child was just playing with their sister weeks ago in the playroom at the hospital. And so those are the hard moments. And it's like, how do you go alongside of other families when they are going through these moments? And not just when it's like the terrible deep moments, but like you want to be there to celebrate again the victories too that are happening, right? Everybody's so different in life. You have your person who is like yelling from the street corner or something that's happening, and then the next person is like, I don't want to talk to anybody. I want to do this myself. This is a private matter. And so for us, with Voices Against Cancer, when I teamed up with originally getting involved, step back, sorry, a little bit, was with St. Baldrick's. And that's a national organization that raises funds. People basically go around and they're like, hey, if I shave my head, donate X amount of dollars to childhood cancer, and they set goals. This is like a 1 year time event that we do once a year in Sioux Falls, raise lots of money. And then that all goes towards pediatric cancer research, finding funding for age-specific treatments for these kiddos, trials, all those kinds of things. So that has been a huge part of something that we've been involved in. Again, something that my salon has been able to get involved in, and something that I could plug into easily because it was something that I was also passionate about in care industry. So we would line our team up. We'd get all kinds of people. We had so many people. It was so fun. Lots of hair, lots of shaved heads, but also lots of money raised for childhood cancer research. And that's where it came down to. So I got involved with that. The gentleman that originally brought that to the Sioux Falls area, his name is Rob. He had a son that he ended up losing to childhood cancer from a secondary cancer, actually. And so his son, he'll be the first to say it, they are a geek family. To say is really the only way to say it, I guess. And that's exactly how they would. Ian is just amazing. He, loves Star Wars, all those things. But his celebration of life, he had it planned out, and had stormtroopers bring his casket down at his funeral. And so just something that their family into is, the Comic-Con and all that kind of stuff. So they spun that now and posted right before I went to the international pageant in July, actually, like the day I flew out, was our third Voices Against Cancer yearly event that we started. And so what that is, it brings in voices of all sorts of characters. And it can be from anime, it can be from people who, write the comics, who draw the pictures for it. We are now spinning that off even into my little family world of sports. We now started to try to bring in some athletes. And so just really trying to expand this to get people here to support childhood cancer and to raise funds for Voices Against Cancer. And what that does is it brings people here to raise those funds. And then that money goes right back to our local area community to support families right here who need the money to even just get to treatment. We have people that live 5 hours from Castle, and they can't get their kid treatment because they don't have gas money to get here. And that is I cannot even imagine being in that situation of your child having cancer and you can't even have the finances to get them to someplace that could potentially treat them. So Voices, that's what they do. They pay people's rent. They pay people's mortgage for a time to be able to do that. We also, if they have a favorite superhero, we maybe get a little blurb of a recording from that superhero to brighten their life. Mm-hmm. So with that, then I went and I decided, what can we do with that now how do we come alongside the families and get in with the families, right? And so we designed these comfort care sacks as kind of my little thing that I spun off then with that. And that's kind of my baby within Voices Against Cancer. And so again, we designed this bag. The bag, it has a cooler in the bottom that opens up. And a lot of kids have temperature sensitive medications that they need to transport back and forth to the hospital, or even, if they're out and about, whatever the case is, so they can keep that in there. And then within the bag, otherwise, it's just a lot of things. I got together with a lot of my cancer mamas and dads and said, what were things that were helpful to you in the moment? And so we got a lot of like toiletries, horse blankets, slippers, items for parents, phone chargers, but yet things for the kiddos too, bugs so they can play pranks on the nurses, just things to like make them smile also.
Make them like be a kid, right?
Exactly.
Like those are the things that kids should be doing.
Yes. And, little Nerf guns, things like that the kids can also enjoy. So just like lots of variety of stuff in there. And so with that, we get that to the hospitals, and what they do then is they get that into the hands of these families when the hospital feels like they're ready. So the child life team feels like they're ready. They get that to them because, like I said, everybody processes things so differently, and we don't want them overwhelmed, but we want them to know that there's a community there to support them. So it's not even us getting in their faces and saying, here you go, we're here to, vomit of the mouth, like all that kind of stuff, and attacking them at the forefront. But then, like I said, they can come to us when they're ready because everybody processes it so differently. And so if that is right away, great. We are there to support you, and we are standing right alongside of you financially, emotionally, whatever it is that you need. But if you're not wanting us there, you're not needing anything in the moment, you're waiting until like you hit that middle of the road mark and you're maybe feeling lonely, that's when we can come alongside you also. And so they have the information to get a hold of us, to reach out to us, to get financial assistance, whatever it is that they need in that bag. And then they can come to us when they're ready. And then we host just some smaller events throughout the year. That is also just a way for them to plug in if they choose to at that time and meet other local families through that are maybe like us, who are way on the other side of it, or those who are just being diagnosed. Yeah. And so that's how we pull them all together, but support them from the beginning at their pace, I guess is a good way of putting it.
Mm-hmm. What is your dream for the comfort care sacks then? How do you want to see it?
I would love to be able, and that's kind of where we're at even with Voices right now, is a lot more people reaching out for assistance because they're seeing what we do from even like surrounding states now as it's getting bigger, which is great. But we're having that conversation of how far out can we support? Do we do more just locally within, the surrounding states, or do we do just a little bit less for each family and be able to expand that out? And so obviously, as we're trying to expand the organization and get the word out about that and raise more funds, our hope is to be able to expand what we're doing and the impact we're having here to other areas and be able to do some of these events, across the country. How cool would that be, to be able to do that? And, it's just as you have these actors, actresses, voices, athletes, whatever it is, come in and, I think they're probably thinking, okay, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to raise some money. And time after time, the feedback that we get from them is how amazing it was to be able to meet these kids and their families and the impact it made on them. And that's really cool for them to be part of something like that. And many times then they go and they start talking to their friends. And that's how we get some really cool people come back and be part of it year after year.
Yeah, absolutely. So of course I have to talk a little bit about pageants. We have to get back to that.
Yeah.
But I do want to know, were you previously interested in pageants, or was it your advocacy with Voices Against Cancer and involvement with St. Baldrick that prompted you to get involved in the Mrs. International system?
I had done pageants very, very few and far between, let's put it that way. When I was younger, I did do one pageant. First year, my husband and I were married. I got first runner up. I was super bummed. And like the next month, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. And I was like, hallelujah, thank you, Jesus. Because that one is one that is like in a swimsuit, televised on TV. And I could have felt like Yeah. Carry the hippo. So I was like, I am so glad I did not have to go do that. But yeah, again, God working in ways you don't always know, right? I was like, whew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I had a friend who her daughter did the national pageant system, and so I saw what it was about, what it stood for, and really intrigued me. I was like, wow, that is totally different than anything I've ever been a part of or anything I've seen. So it did kind of catch my attention that way years ago. Again, having 4 kids, I was like, I hardly have time to breathe. I just, not in my radar. But the more I saw what you could do with that, I guess, is really what made me want to do it again, or get involved in it. And also why I did the international system. I wouldn't probably do any other system.
Mm-hmm.
It was just that I had that option within that year to bring to the forefront the need for childhood cancer research and how much is left unturned because of this, the unawareness that is out there. People just, if you're not involved in it, you don't get it. You don't know, if you're not impacted by it, you don't get it. And so how can I bring that away to other people in a different set of eyes? I felt like, not that we've like obviously turned every corner and every stone in our area, but you only can talk to so many people and you only know so many people. And so for me, this was a totally different demographic. It was a totally different area, a totally different group of people that I could get out there and get in front of, get this word out there and this message that I feel is so important for people to see. So I would say it definitely was the advocacy part of it and the platform side of it that, really pulled me in that.
Yep. I agree. Same. And to that point too, it's like the advocacy piece is really important. And my husband and I, we have no prior connection to childhood cancer at all, but we're parents.
Yeah.
And we can imagine hearing the words, your child has cancer, like you and so too many other parents have.
Yeah.
But that's why we feel like it's important to show that people with no ties can be advocates for these families and children and the research for sure. Like the research is what is important. We need to be proactive, especially because like you said, less than 4% of funding, and our kids are worth more than that.
Right.
And
exactly. That's just sad.
Yes, it is. And so, I'm excited to be on the journey as well to Mrs. International because of the difference that people like you and I are going to be able to make through this platform of pageantry and sharing. I mean, I don't nearly have as much knowledge as people like you do because I haven't been there myself, but I have met enough people and heard enough stories to know that we need to lean into this and we need more people to be advocating for the research for childhood cancer. So we need to be proactive. So on that note, what is your one piece of advice for people that may be looking to make an impact for pediatric cancer? They've heard this podcast, they've heard your story, they want to help. What would your advice be to them?
I would say, first and foremost, if there is somebody out there that you know who is in the midst of it, who's in the trenches of this, reach out to them and tell them what you're going to do for them. Don't ask them what they need. They're not going to tell you anything. They're not. Everyone is too, we have our egos. We have our, like, people came and mowed our yard and my husband was like, oh my gosh, I feel so bad. I'm like, just let them so we can have one moment to just chill, right? So find something that you can do for them. Deliver a meal to their house, even if you don't cook it. Who cares, right? Just order something, do something, have groceries delivered to their house, do something for them because they maybe feel unseen at that moment. They're maybe having a tough day, whatever it is. Reach out to somebody, whether you know them just through church and you maybe don't know them great, but just say, hey, I'm going to do this for you this week. When can I have it delivered? Would be my first thing. Second of all, find something in your community. If you want to do something locally that is like Voices of Cancer that you can get plugged into and volunteer. We're always looking for people to even do deliveries, things like that. It doesn't have to be anything major. It doesn't have to be financial, but find something that you can volunteer at here and there just to make an impact and just to be helpful, because then it frees up time for those to reach out to other, like for us, it's like frees up something for the person who's going to be talking to the people to bring them in. Now they can focus on that and not make a donut delivery to the castle, because that's another thing to do with it, is just to make people smile, right? So find something that you can get involved in. And if there's nothing out there that you know of, jump on Voices Against Cancer, and we have on there ways you can get involved and help even with us. We have, there's a whole tab on there for caring, the care sacks, of how you can create your own within your community, whether it's through church or a school group. We have a whole list there of things that you can put in there, things we recommend, ways to make the bags, all the things. And we would love to be able to see that get spread throughout, even just those care sacks, because feedback that we get from those is like, that's amazing. I left my toothbrush at home. I didn't have a phone charger. Thought my phone would be enough. And, they need those things, and they're things that you don't think of that. You're worrying about your child's life. And so those care sacks are huge. But yeah, there's always so many organizations, some amazing ones out there. And so just find some place that you can get plugged in if you don't know a family specifically to plug yourself into. And even like you, I can't tell you thank you enough for being an advocate for something like this, and seeing the need for that. Because again, like you said, you haven't directly been impacted by it, but we need other people besides just those of when you're impacted by something major. Why we are where we're at, and why my daughter got the treatment she did, and why she's alive today is because of work that people did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, for the advocacy to find that research for the treatment that she got. Because if she would have had this diagnosis 20 years ago, she probably wouldn't have, because there was not that done then. So my hope is that what I'm doing now and what I'm doing today and what I've done in the last 5-10 years is going to save those kids that are coming up. And that might even be my grandchild. Don't know that, So wherever you can get involved, do it.
Yep, absolutely.
It'll feel you here too. So
yes,
yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you for being here again and taking the time. I truly appreciate it. You sharing your family's story. And then one last time, if people do want to get involved with Caring Voices, donate some items to Comfort Care Sacks, where can they find that information?
Yeah. If you just Google Voices Against Cancer, it should pop up for you. But otherwise, it's www.voicesagainstcancer.org, I believe.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a way to even link bottom here, during this podcast. Yeah. Yep. Just put the link to that there. But yeah, you can jump on there. You can see when we have events. We'd love to have you join us. If you're going to be coming to South Dakota for it, let me know. I'd love to meet everybody. So yeah, it's a great organization to be a part of, and it's been fun for me also. So yeah, really exciting to see it growing too.
Yes.
Well, I really appreciate it.
Thanks for the impact that you're making, and thanks for joining us on Act to Impact.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to Act to Impact with Brandy DeVries. If this show ignited your fire and inspired you to take action to make an impact, please share this episode with a friend, leave a 5-star review, or write a review to let others know how the show impacted you. I can't wait to see the action you are taking to make an impact, and I'd love for you to share that with our community. Go ahead and tag me on social media as you are out making an impact in the world. Do you have a story to share and want to be a guest on Act to Impact? I'd love to connect with you.